So thank you very much, Dato Timothy Ong, the chairman of Asia Inc. Forum, for agreeing to speak to us. Dato, working for you, people may not realize that, thinking that you are a serious person, but you do have a funny side.
It's very important to have a funny side. Yeah. I don't know whether you've seen some of Barack Obama's performances at the press club. He is so funny. I think everyone, big or small, it's so important to have a funny side.
The places that you hang around with for work, are mostly very serious political areas like APEC, so on and so forth. Are there funny sides to them?
Of course there are.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact.
So aside from Obama, who are the funny leaders? And are they more attractive?
Well, actually, Obama in APEC is dead serious. I thought this last APEC, I was struck by Jokowi, who was so down to earth. I mean, he showed us a slide presentation of how he resolved this major blockage to building a highway in Indonesia.
Sure.
And it was like he was showing us his personal slide collection. And then there was a picture of him talking to the people blocking the construction of the road. And then he said, that's me, that's me over there. We all, it went from serious to being very warm. Yeah, unpresidential is right, but we warmed up to him.
Right.
So maybe this is the new style of politics, where
more personable,
and where the gap between ruler and ruled becomes a lot less. So that old style where there's a huge distance, I think is changing.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
good or bad?
I think it just reflects the changing times.
Which leader impresses you, Dato?
Well, okay. So I've had the good fortune of observing many leaders live. So watching them speak and interact in a panel. I would say that many of them have outstanding individual qualities, but in terms of impact on their societies,
sure.
I think of three. Of course, Lee Kuan Yew.
Yes.
I mean, Lee Kuan Yew's place in history, in my view, is assured. I mean, here is a man who's transformed his society and has demonstrated powerful leadership qualities. And one of the most powerful is the ability to persist with things that are unpopular, to resist, playing up to popular sentiments. So he was able always to push through, to persist with unpopular measures that were actually good for the country. Aung San Suu Kyi, now, her career is still evolving. I don't know what the last word on her career will be, but her courage, for so many years under house arrest, her charisma is powerful. I mean, when I first met her, I was kind of like some nervous schoolboy, and she's at this conference we organized, she spoke without reference to notes. She took questions. All her answers were perfectly formed, not a note, not a scrap of paper, not a, some people would just, no, not at all. The current president of the Philippines, because when he became president 5 years ago, the Philippines was considered a bit of a basket case. After many years of decline, go to Manila today. I mean, the place is booming, vibrant. He's attacked from morning till night because it's a democracy. So, you don't have to be too respectful, but, there is no doubt that he has turned the country around with his commitment to good governance. I mean, even his worst enemies concede that he's incorruptible. Yeah.
But being from Brunei, you know that the exposure is very limited, and yet here you are, babbling up names after names of world leaders that you've met. How do you get to this position?
Okay, I owe a debt to Brunei because Brunei is a very small country.
Right.
I had the good fortune of representing Brunei when I was much younger at many of these international conferences.
Sure.
So whenever they were looking for someone from Brunei, there I was. His Majesty's government gave me a big break in appointing me first to the Eminent Persons Group, which was this think tank within APEC. I think I was appointed, each country appointed a thought leader.
Sure.
So in 1994 or 95, I was appointed to represent Brunei in the Eminent Persons Group. Then I was appointed to the APEC Business Advisory Council. And in 2000, I chaired the council.
Yep.
So coming from a small country like Brunei has been a huge advantage. Because if I'm Indonesian, for example, the odds are much less of being selected because there's so many people to choose from. So here I owe a debt to Brunei and to the government.
So to the young people of Brunei, it's actually quite encouraging of what you've just said.
Yes. But there's another side to it,
Yes.
which is when you have the opportunity favors those who are prepared.
Yeah.
So every meeting I went to, I made sure that I was well prepared for my voice to be heard. So I tell people, you want to go to a meeting, don't just be a bystander. Don't just, be, a fence sitter. Make sure your voice is heard. Don't speak too much because people might, as a young man or woman, when you go to a meeting, don't speak for too long. But make sure that whatever you say is impactful so that people notice you. The opportunity is there, but if you don't seize it, it will pass you by. So I made sure that every meeting I went to, at the right moment, my voice would be heard.
You mentioned a lot of out-of-reach personality, but how about the people that influence you that we can all relate to, that shape who you are today? That's closer, within a community. Are they such mentor or people that you look at?
Yes. I have a number of people. Of course, my late father, my late uncle. I have an uncle who was very close to my father, Yi Shao Kai.
Are they all intellectuals?
I think many of those who shaped me, they were thinking people, but not necessarily intellectuals. But within the region, the late Tan Sri Nordin Sopi, who was creator of Malaysia's leading think tank, ISIS, the Institute of Strategic and International Studies. Tan Sri Nordin, he's a great thinker, and he provided an opportunity for me to be part of his conferences. He was very eloquent speaker. In the Philippines, there's a gentleman who is now in his early 90s, Washington Sisip. Yeah, he's a legendary business figure in the Philippines, but he's much more than a businessman. He's more like a statesman. Paved the way for me to get to know the Philippines. Now I sit on 2 high-level boards there, but I have watched him at close quarters, the way his mind works, the clarity of his thinking, the way he communicates, and he's in his early 90s. But it's not just those people. My former boss when I was in the BEDB, Prince Mohammed, I think is a man that I admire greatly.
Can you tell us more about Prince Mohammed?
He has a unique style of motivating people. His approach is, once the objectives are clear, he empowers his people to do their best. He is supportive, but he is very demanding in terms of making sure that the goals are clearly understood. His approach, it's not so much, he's a highly intelligent person, but the approach is not intellectual in the conventional sense. It doesn't come from having read scholarly books and so on. But it comes from a certain insight as to how human beings function. So, and he will push you to ensure that your ideas are clear by asking very basic questions and by asking them repeatedly. So I would cite him as an example of someone who has helped to shape me, But, one is learning all the time in life. One doesn't just learn from older people. You learn also from your children. You learn also from younger people. The important thing is to have an outlook that is open to new ideas and always to be willing to be challenged. Now, easier said than done because, we all have egos. We all have vanity. So sometimes we like people to simply accept what we say. But a certain openness of mind is important to learning and personal development.
Let's talk about BDB. You were there for what, a good 4, 5 years?
5 years.
5 years?
Well, actually more, because for 5 years I was acting chairman, and before that I was deputy chairman. Yeah.
Sure.
But in a key leadership role for about 5 years.
And you know that Brunei right now is, and with most oil producing countries are facing the drop in oil price, a drastic drop. What would Datuk Tim do if you were still running BDB? What would be the priorities for the country?
So let me respond in general terms,
Sure.
because I am no longer there, and I don't want to make comments which appear as if I know better. Yeah, because I think the people who are there now are doing their best,
Sure.
and I want to be supportive. So I don't want to appear as if I'm making criticisms or to suggest that I have better answers. So my general view is that in an oil-dependent country, when oil prices are down, it is actually a great opportunity for economic reform, for changing things so that it is easier to do business, easier for people to invest, easier to succeed in business. So I would say, because when oil prices are high, generally the incentive to do this is less. Because things are going well, so the revenues are coming in. Why bother? But when a country that's why you notice when oil revenues decline, suddenly entrepreneurship, economic reform. The Russians are now talking about the importance of conducting economic reforms. Whether in fact they do it completely is another matter. But suddenly it's a big thing, big priority. And you will see from, the speeches given at the Legislative Council that, entrepreneurship has become a major priority. And why is this so? Because when oil prices drop, it is a reminder to us how vulnerable we are to forces beyond our control. But when oil revenues drop, suddenly we realize, how fickle this kind of fortune can be. And therefore, in my view, this is a great opportunity for us to address all the kind of issues that we talk about when we talk about ease of doing business. This would be a great time to say, look, what are the things we can do to make it easier for entrepreneurs to succeed in this country? What kind of red tape can we start to eliminate or streamline?
Dato', I've met you for 15 years. From an outsider or a friend's observation, I would have thought that you are a lot happier now than when perhaps I was younger and look up to you a lot more tense.
No. I think you're right. I think there are things about life that we learn. Hopefully we get wiser as we get older.
So it's a fair assessment?
It is a fair assessment, yes. I am happier.
Uh-huh.
I'm happier because I have learned to distinguish between the kind of things I should be bothered with
Uh-huh.
and those that I shouldn't be. I have also learned not to sweat the small stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned not to be too bothered by things I cannot control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have learned to focus on things that matter. Sometimes we get all flustered up about things that don't really matter. You know, like someone said that in the last moments of your life on earth, you are rarely thinking about how much money you have, how many cars you have, how many houses you have. You don't think about those things.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the people who matter to you. So, you know, when I was younger, I tend sometimes not to have the perspective that I have now. And this perspective makes me happier.
One of the reasons I think that you were a lot more tense during, my early days working for you was, Asia Inc., which was, a pretty uphill battle.
Yes.
And time was tough. Let's reflect on Asia Inc. period. What do you think were some of the milestones for you and things that you could have done better?
Well, to begin with, it was a mistake for me to have gone into publishing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was totally unprepared for it. I did not understand the business. I underestimated the challenge. I mean, this was a magazine that was in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought it over thinking that I would turn it around quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I got everything wrong. I did not have the right team. I did not manage them correctly. I mean, but some good things came from this, including my own friendship with you, yeah? And now you are on to a publishing career. So, you know, in life, everything has its blessings, yeah? But in terms of my decision to be a publisher, I think that was a mistake, and I paid for it.
But a lot of people will argue that that would also be your call to fame in the international platform, would it not?
So, out of that mistake, because I learned from it, and learning from it means I stopped publishing.
Sure.
Yeah, a pan-regional publication is a tough proposition. So I learned from that. But then I used what I learned to start Asia Inc. Forum, which is a business I know a lot better.
Sure.
Okay, very few people know conferencing as well as I do. Okay, so mistake, learn from it, move on.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's in my view the Asia Inc. story.
Dato', you seem to be very open about calling Asia Inc. magazine a mistake. In the Asian society, whereby we often would shy away from addressing or telling people about our mistake in order to show that we are strong. It doesn't seem to apply in your rule. How important is the admission towards one's shortcoming, be a part of the leadership lesson that, especially for the Asian context that we should embrace?
I think very important, and I think it's very important to have the realization that you can learn so much from mistakes, and that a mistake is not the end of the story. So I am, I am not at all shy about talking about this, because I find that every great person has made mistakes. And the only difference very often between people who are very successful and those who are not so successful is their ability to learn from their mistakes and to regroup and to bounce back. So, I think that a leader can do so much for other people by having an open discussion about this, and by saying to people, look at me, I made a mistake, I learned from it, I bounce back, and so can you. So, there's this saying that, success is not from never failing, but in rising every time you fail or fall. So that's the key. Resilience. The most important quality, I think, for success is what I call resilience. Resilience is the ability to become stronger even when things are not going well.
What do you tell yourself when you were going through such difficulty? How do you psych yourself up?
Well, I tell myself, okay, this is generally very important. Whatever you are going through in life, you say to yourself, this too will pass away. Okay?
It's easier said than done, isn't it?
Easier said than done. Okay. And actually, you can't often do it on your own. So you need to have mentors. You need to have close friends.
If you were to list the top 3 things that help you to...
I think the bottom line is never give up. Okay? No matter how bad things are, never give up. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, easier said than done. So you need to have people who you can share with. So having a strong, supportive family makes a difference. Mm-hmm. Having good friends makes a difference. Having faith, some spiritual sustenance, mm-hmm. makes a difference. It varies from person to person. I like to tell people that if you had visited Hangzhou 16 years ago and happened to meet this English teacher who went on to create Alibaba, you would have considered him to be a failure because he was from a poor family. He was not a good student. He failed 2 times to get to university, and the 3rd time he got into the worst university in Hangzhou. And when he graduated, he couldn't get a job. He was rejected from nearly every job he applied for, including by KFC. Okay. His first 2 startups failed, and the 3rd one was Alibaba. Today he's the richest man in China. Mm-hmm. And Alibaba is, I understand, in market value larger than, is it Amazon and eBay, something like that. Yeah. Now, what stood out from everyone who has known him is that the man just never gives up. Mm-hmm. He never gives up. Now, if you had been in Hangzhou 16 years ago, I think that was the year he started the company, or maybe the year before, and you ran into him at a coffee shop. In your mind, you would have said, interesting guy. And Shaun Hoon interviewed you after that. Hey, name me some success stories. You wouldn't think of him. Why would you think of him? He 16 years ago was not a success. Yes. So the point I want to make is we are too sweeping in our own judgments of other people and in our judgments of ourselves. Too easily we say to ourselves sometimes, oh, look, I don't know. We have conversation with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. In our conversation just now, you spoke about your appreciation for Djokovic, for humility. I want to touch on that point because there is a clear distinction between the Asian kind of leadership as opposed to the Western kind of leadership, whereby virtues such as humility is extremely important, if not, one of the top.
I would not generalize, say, Eastern is like that, Western is like that, because there are some Asian leaders that are frankly not humble. Okay. So I think each leader has his or her own style, mm-hmm. And authenticity is important. Yeah. Right. So nothing worse than a fake humility. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we sometimes see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So it must fit in with the kind of person you are. We want authenticity. When we meet someone, we want them to be themselves. We don't want them, because when you are not authentic, it's people catch on.
Sure.
Yeah. So For example, Aung San Suu Kyi, very, very brave, but does she come across as very, very humble? Not really. You know, she has an authority to her. Yeah, she, you know, she is not arrogant. How do we, difficult for me to describe.
Confidence?
Yeah. I mean, Jokowi is also confident, but, you know, Aung San Suu Kyi, she walks into a room and she is in charge. She has no hesitation about giving her views and telling you that she doesn't agree with yours. Yeah, so I would not, it's different. But
That's not humility.
Yeah, but it works with her. Now, okay, going back to your question, I think in today's democratic context, humility is important, but it has to be authentic. Jokowi's style of his style works very well for him, and for that reason, he's much loved in Indonesia. Now, he will face challenges because when you rule, you have to do things which people don't like. You know, there's a controversy now about capital punishment.
Yep.
You know, and that I understand is very popular in Indonesia, but is subject him to some attacks from, particularly from the West. So when you have to take decisions, that affects your popularity. But his style, I mean, you know, the way he walks with the crowd, the way he smiles, the way he seems like the man in the street, I think is very powerful. And particularly within a democratic context. Because, you know, he is president of one of the world's successful democracies, you know, and people value humility. But, you know, the key is it has to be authentic. In his case, it comes across as authentic, and that makes it powerful.
Dato', my final question is this: yeah, let's not be humble, as we are talking about, you know, the point about humility. How would you like to be remembered? What's Tim Ong's legacy going to be?
You know,
let's not be humble.
You know, I'm hesitating because it sounds so presumptuous to talk about legacy. Yeah, but I would like to be remembered as someone who made a difference to you know, the organizations that I have been involved in, to my community, and to my country. Now, there are many things in life that each of us want to do, and myself included, but some things you want to do, but you don't have the opportunity to do. But I would like to be remembered as someone who took all the opportunities that I had and tried to make a difference, and made a difference. So that is what I would like to be remembered for. So when the name comes up, years after I've gone, somebody said, "Do you remember that guy?" And they said, "Yeah, he made a difference to me. I had a conversation with him, and he took an interest in what I was doing. I was working in an organization that he was leading, and he changed that organization. I worked for him for many years, and he gave me opportunities in life. But even better, he was my dad, and he was a great father." That would be, in fact, so when we talk about legacy, sometimes we forget about the people who are the most important to us. You know, it would be great if my children said he was a great father.
Thank you very much, Dato'.
Thank you.
Thank you.